Now let's start talking about template lookups. So if I look at this playbook here, you see that I have some variables defined, like a dictionary and a list. And I get down to my first task, and let's look at my first task. So just have a name string that it's going to print out when it executes. Then I have a debug string. Now I get into my message, and let's look at what I do here. So I look up a template, and I point to this Jinja 2 template. Now, Jinja 2 is a templating system in Python, and we're going to talk about that a lot more in the next class. But it basically lets you have this combination of text and code in the same file. So you can have things like for loops and if structures in the same file that you just have normal text. So let's go ahead and look at this simple template.j2. So nothing in this except really just straight text. There's no if statements, there's no for loops, just 3 lines of hello world. We go back here, and you notice I have a tag of simple template. Let's go ahead and execute this playbook. Give it the simple underscore template tag, execute it, and you can see we get back hello world, hello world, hello world. It executes it both for Cisco Router 1 and Cisco Router 2 because up at the top I'm executing it on the Cisco group, and that's what's in my inventory. Now if I go to the second task, let's expand on this. So now I'm going to process this list, my list, which I have here. I'm going to process it using this template. So I'm going to use the template lookup. I have this process underscore list.j2 that we're going to operate on. Now notice I have some text. I have some more text. This is just 3 dots. Down here I have some text. But in here you'll notice I have a for loop, and it has a start of a curly brace %, and then it ends with curly brace % here, and I say for element in my list. What was my list? That was my variable I defined in my playbook. It's going to go through that just like it would in Python. Each time through, this variable named element is going to be stuffed with one of the things in my list. And then here I do what we've seen earlier with referencing Jinja 2, is I just do curly brace to represent the variable, which in this case is element, and then here I end my for loop. So in this case it's going to loop through the list, print out each one of the elements line after line, and it's going to intermingle this with just regular text. And let's go ahead and we'll execute that using the process underscore list tag. And here we see our text. Some text, some new lines, and then we start to see each of our list elements. Hello world, something else, some more new lines, and then the text down at the end. So we're processing those variables inside that Jinja 2 template. And let's look at this last example. This time I'm going to take this dictionary, which has these 6 key value pairs. I'm going to call this external template, this process dictionary.j2, and let's look at that. Now here, once again, I have some Jinja 2 constructs. Here's my dictionary variable, which is defined in the playbook. I'm going to do the .items method, which is a Python method which gives you both the key and the value. I'm going to stuff the key into this k variable, the value into this v variable. Now notice I now add an if statement. So I say if the variable k equals the string key 3, print that out. Then here's the end of my if, here's the end of my for loop. So basically what we're going to get out of this is the key and the value for key 3, and everything else is going to be ignored. And let's execute this playbook using our tags of process dictionary. And here you can see it prints out key 3 and value 3, and none of the other items get printed out. Now, how can we take advantage of this with networking devices and in more real-life scenarios? So here we have a playbook. We have our host Cisco. I have 2 providers specified. I have one provider, this creds, that I could use with Ansible core modules. And then I have another provider that I can use with Napalm. So I get down here and I call Napalm get facts. And this gives me back the ARP table. Now let's just look at what that looks like. And I actually want to do it with verbose. Okay, so we scroll up, and here we see for router 2, not that one, here's the straight call from Napalm. And it gives us back this variable called Napalm ARP table that, noticed, it's a list, and each of the list entries is this dictionary corresponding to the ARP table entry. So let me copy just some of that so I have it for reference. Now we're going to take this output and we're going to process it through this convert napalm arp.j2. So let's look at this Jinja 2 template. So what I'm doing here at a high level is, here's what we got back from this Napalm call. We got this variable called Napalm ARP table that was a list with these dictionaries for the elements. Now say I wanted to simplify that data structure, and what I wanted my new data structure to be was just a dictionary where the IP is the key and the MAC address is the corresponding value. So a simplified dictionary that I could use much more readily. So the IP address will be the key, and then that's going to give me back the MAC address. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to process this original variable that we got back from this Napalm getter, and I'm going to use that to construct a YAML file. Notice I have my 3 hyphens. Notice here I'm getting a variable back from this. So I loop over this list. ARP entry is going to be one of these dictionaries. I then call ARP entry sub IP. That's going to give me this key. This will give me this key, which will look it up and give me this value of 10.220.88.1. Notice here my YAML, I've specified a colon, and then I've specified the value I want to correspond to that. So I'm using this Jinja 2 template to transform the data structure from the original data structure that Napalm provided to a new data structure that I want to have. So I go ahead and delete all these lines. Let's go ahead and run the playbook. I'm going to comment out everything after line 23, and let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like. So now we scroll up here, and this is the output we're getting back as a string. Now it's hard to see here because of Ansible's behavior of not printing out these new lines and strings. But let's go ahead and just dump this in to Python. And see what it looks like. So this is the output we're getting back. And when you look at this, hopefully you can recognize that this is just a YAML dictionary. So here's my YAML dictionary, my 3 hyphens. Then I have all these key value pairs. So one big dictionary. Here are all the keys. Here are all the corresponding values. Now we go back to my playbook. And then let's see what we do for the next steps. I'm going to shorten it a little bit to make it more readable. So now here in this line 23, I go ahead and say, convert the napalm data structure, string that gets printed. I call my debug. Now once again, I'm doing this template lookup, convert napalm arp.j2. This is the same exact call I did in line 19. But now I'm going to pipe it into this other construct in Ansible. And this is the capability of using Jinja 2 filters. So there's a bunch of Jinja 2 filters available to us. And I'm going to talk about those a lot more in a video coming up. But here I'm basically saying I'm going to use the from YAML Jinja 2 filter. So what's that filter going to do? It's going to convert YAML that I had retrieved somehow before the pipe, and it could have been directly in line, and it's going to convert that into a data structure inside of this Ansible playbook. So it will no longer be just this string blob. I'll actually have a new data structure in my playbook. And let's go look at that. So we're retrieving the data from the devices. Now we're processing it. Now notice here, I have a dictionary. I have all my key value pairs. Here's from router 1 and here's from router 2. So our conversion looks like it worked correctly. Now let's go back to our playbook and add a few more elements to it. So now in line 23, I was just doing this conversion and printing out that new data structure directly. As opposed to doing that in line 27, I'm actually going to use it to set a new variable. So I'm creating this new variable called new_arp. Uses the exact same command that I used here. But now I'm actually just setting it as a variable. And then in line 30, I'm just going to use that variable to print out one of the ARP table entries. So here I'm saying print out the MAC address corresponding to this IP. And then here we're executing this playbook again. It's using the napalm get facts to go and retrieve information from the device. Here we see we set our fact, so we created that new variable. And then here we see our last debugging statement, and you can see we're printing out the MAC address corresponding to this IP. So this template lookup can be very helpful for doing this data structure conversion. Data structure conversion can actually be very problematic in Ansible, and it can be tricky on how to accomplish it. And one trick you can use to simplify this data structure conversion is to feed it through this external template, do the conversion in there, and then read it back in. Read it back in as a new data structure back into your playbook.